Hi, I'm Carly McAvoy. I wanted to do another example of a frequency distribution table, this one having numbers that are to the tenths instead of whole numbers. So I didn't give you the whole data set. But what I have told you is what the maximum value in the data set was and what the minimum value, and I'm saying to use 5 classes. So to figure out the class width, we would take the maximum value minus the minimum value and divide by the number of classes. And that gives you 2.08. But because we put those brackets around, that's telling you to round to the next highest value that matches the data in your data set. And our data went to the tenths place, so we want to round up to the tenths place. And this tells us that 2.1 is going to be our class width. We always start with our minimum value for our first value in our class. So we have 10.1, and if we add 2.1 to that, we get 12.2. And if we add 2.1 to 12.2, we get 14.3 and 16.4 and 18.5. Notice we have 5 different classes here. Then if I want to figure out what's the upper class limit in my classes, I just subtract 1/10 from the lower class limit of the next class. So 12.2 minus 1/10 is 12.1. So that tells me what my class limits are. Now I've given you the frequencies here, so I didn't show you the data set, but I've just given you the frequencies, and then I actually added those up as well. So there's 390 values in this particular data set. That's the total. The next thing is the class frequency. If you want to find the class frequency, you just divide the relative frequency, divide the class frequency by the sum of all the frequencies. So in the case of the first one, I had 45 in this class. And so I'm going to divide 45 by 390. And that's how I got 0.115 or 0 and 115 thousandths. I rounded to the thousandths place. You have to see what your homework is asking you to do. If you need to round to the hundreds, you'd only round it back to 2 places. And then if I was asked to find that as a percent, I would just multiply by 100. And that's just going to move the decimal point 2 places to the right and give me 11.5%. So the first class I have 0.115 as a relative frequency, or as a percent, it's 11.5. And then I went through and did that for all the rest of those, and I didn't show the calculations for those, but it's the same thing. You're going to take 86 divided by 390 for the second class, 129 divided by 390, and so forth. Notice that when I'm finished, all my relative frequencies add up to 1. Or if I'm talking about a percent, they add up to 100. That's an important thing to remember. Okay, let's look at the class boundaries. Well, we want to find the class gap, and then we want to add that to the upper limit and subtract that from the lower limit. The class gap is just the, look at the difference between the lower class limit and the previous upper class limit. So we're going to subtract those two, 12.2 minus 12.1, and divide by 2. And that gives us 0.05. So 0.05 is the class gap. And then what we do is we take the lower class limit and subtract the class gap to get the lower class boundary. And we take that class gap and add it to the upper one to get the upper class boundary. So you can see that for 10.1, we have 10.05 because we subtracted that. And then for 12.1, we added it, so we got 12.15. Once you see that, we can just continue to do that. This one's 1, 5, 2, 5, 3, 5, 4, 5. It looks like I have this one incorrect. So I don't know why I had that as 0.2, but I believe that would be 12.15 because we're taking that away from 2. So that's how we get our class boundaries. We just are adding and subtracting the difference between those two limits divided by 2, and we're adding and subtracting that class gap. And then the midpoints, are the probably easiest ones of the whole group, and we're just taking our lower class and our upper class values and finding the average. So 10.1 and 12.1 and divide by 2, and that gives you 11.1. So that's how to find those, especially when you don't have whole numbers. Sometimes it can be a little bit confusing. Have a fantastic